Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about budgeting, but maybe not in the way you're used to. Forget rigid, one-size-fits-all rules. I want you to think of different budgeting methods as tools in a toolbox, because the real key is knowing which tool to grab for which job to build a really solid financial future for your organization.
So let me just ask you this. Does this question hit a little too close to home? Come on, be honest. Just taking last year's numbers and tacking on, say, 5%, we've all seen it. It's super common, but it's often the least strategic way to plan. That's why we're going to dig into some much more powerful alternatives.
So here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with project budgeting. That's budgeting for a mission. Then we'll get super precise with activity-based budgeting. After that, we're going to look at what it means to start from scratch with zero-based budgeting, and then we'll check out the super dynamic approach of a continuous budget. And of course, at the end, we'll wrap it all up to help you choose the right tool for the job.
All right, first up in our toolkit is the project budget. Now, this is your go-to tool when you've got a single, massive, and really distinct initiative that absolutely needs its own dedicated financial plan from start to finish.
Think about it this way. A project budget is like a self-contained financial bubble. It pulls together every single cost you expect for one specific major undertaking. We're talking about things like designing a brand new airliner or building a skyscraper. Yeah, it's part of the company's overall finances, but the project is so big and so important that its costs and its profits really need to be tracked separately.
And you know, this table right here, it tells the whole story of the project's life. Just look at the numbers. You can see how design costs are absolutely massive in that first quarter, and then they drop right off. Then engineering takes the baton, ramping up and peaking in the second quarter, and finally production kicks into high gear and just dominates the budget for the rest of the year. It's literally the financial narrative of the project's entire life cycle, all in one place.
But what if your costs aren't tied to one giant project? What if they're spread out all over a bunch of complex operations? Well, for that, you're going to need a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. And that is exactly where our next tool, activity-based budgeting, or ABB for short, comes into play.
Okay, so here's the problem that ABB was born to solve. Traditional budgeting, right? It often takes all those indirect costs, the stuff that's not tied to a single product, and just lumps them into one big bucket. Then it kind of smears that cost across everything using a really simple metric, like how many units you produced. ABB, on the other hand, gets way more granular. It actually pinpoints the specific activities that are causing those costs in the first place.
Just take a look at this traditional budget. See that one line item? Allocated indirect costs? It's a huge number, right? But it tells you absolutely nothing about why those costs are so high. It treats a super simple product and a really complex one exactly the same, which can totally wreck your understanding of which products are actually making you money. So how does ABB fix this mess? Well, it's a pretty straightforward three-step process. First, you figure out your core activities, things like product design or setting up machines for a production run. Second, you create a separate cost pool, basically a budget, for each one of those activities. And third, and this is the magic part, you find a specific driver that has a direct cause and effect relationship with each cost pool. And here is that third step in action. So instead of that one big, messy bucket, we have these really specific cost pools. The cost of product design? Well, that's driven by the number of engineering hours. The cost of setting up production? That's driven by how many batches you run. See? It's all about creating a crystal clear, direct link between an action and its financial consequence. And here it is. This is the payoff. Using this new method, we finally see the true cost. The old, traditional system actually made the complex product look cheaper to make than it really was. But by linking costs to the actual activities that drive them, boom, we get a much more accurate picture of our profitability. And that is the power of ABB.
Okay, now for something completely different. If project budgeting is your tool for a specific mission, and ABB is all about precision, then zero-based budgeting is like hitting the total reset button. I mean it. This is a radical approach that forces you to question literally everything.
This quote right here, it gets right to the heart of it. With this method, there are no assumptions. Nothing gets carried over from last year's budget just because it was there last year. No, every single line item, every single dollar has to be justified from the ground up every single time you make a budget.
So let's be clear, this is the polar opposite of incremental budgeting, where you just kind of tweak last year's numbers. Zero-based budgeting, or ZBB, forces a manager to build their budget from a base of, well, zero.
You can't just walk in and ask for a 5% increase. You have to explain why you need every single penny in the first place, as if you were starting a brand new company.
And here's a little piece of trivia for you, which I think is fascinating. This is not just some theoretical concept from a textbook. ZB was actually used by Texas Instruments way back in the late 60s, and it was even introduced into the U.S. federal budget system by President Jimmy Carter in the 1970s, so it has some serious history.
So, okay, what's the catch? Well, the huge advantage is that ZBB forces this incredibly deep analysis of every single expense. It is amazing for finding and cutting waste and inefficiency. The major disadvantage, as you can probably guess, is that it is incredibly time-consuming and requires a massive effort from every single manager involved.
Our fourth and final tool is for anyone who operates in a really fast-changing dynamic environment. It's called the continuous or rolling budget, and it's all about one thing: staying agile and always looking ahead.
The idea here is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. A rolling budget is constantly being updated and extended into the future. So instead of having a static annual plan that gets more and more out of date as the year goes on, this budget is a living, breathing document.
Here's exactly how it works. Take a look at that top table. As the first quarter of the year ends, it gets dropped from the plan. It's done. Then, a new quarter, in this case, the first quarter of the next fiscal year, gets tacked on to the end. What this does is it ensures the company always has a full 12-month or 4-quarter budget right in front of them, forcing everyone to constantly think and plan ahead.
The main advantage here is pretty obvious, right? It forces management to keep their eyes on the horizon. It really helps prevent that short-sightedness that can creep in with a static annual budget. Now, the flip side, much like ZBB, is the time commitment. Managers are pretty much always involved in some phase of budget prep.
Okay, so we've unpacked 4 very distinct, very powerful tools for budgeting. Now let's pull it all together and create a simple guide so you can figure out which one is the right one for your specific needs.
All right, if there's one slide to remember, it's this one. It's pretty straightforward. Got a single, huge undertaking? Use a project budget. Running complex operations where you desperately need to know your true costs? Activity-based is your best friend. When you absolutely need to do a deep clean and slash costs, the intense effort of zero-based budgeting will pay off big time. And if you're in a market that's always changing, a continuous or rolling budget will keep you on your toes. It really is all about matching the tool to the task at hand. So as we wrap up, I'm just going to leave you with this one final thought. A budget isn't just some boring spreadsheet full of numbers. It is the financial blueprint for your organization's future. It dictates what's important, it allocates your precious resources, and ultimately, it shapes your success. So the real question is, which one of these tools are you going to use to build it? Thanks for joining me.